In 2019, the first Strange Realities Conference took place in Nashville, Tennessee. The pandemic and turmoil of the following year could not stop 2020's conference from thriving in cyberspace as a live streaming event. Now, for 2021, the third annual Strange Realities Conference will combine these worlds into a paranormal hybrid event, live in person in Nashville and streaming online. Join us in exploring just how truly strange our reality can be with an interdimensional lineup of speakers presenting unique and intellectual perspectives on magic, mysteries, and the paranormal.
Featuring Alan Greenfield, Dr. J. Michael Bennett, aka Dr. Future, Tim Banal, Soraya Ascaf, Dr. Stephen Finley, Aaron Gullius, Amy Pachula, Brent Rains, Chris Ernst, Heather Mosier, Michael Hughes, Jose Herrera, Joshua Cutchin, Kiki Dombrowski, Nathan Isaac, P.D. Newman, Steven Snyder, aka Recluse, David Metcalf, Timothy Renner, Steve Stockton, and Ren Collier. Tickets available at strangerealitiesconference.com.
It's going to be amazing.
Yes, we will soon learn about Charles Hayes, Adam. It is some crazy shit that they'd only dig up in Somerset, Kentucky.
Holding out on me, Surfio. I haven't heard about this before.
Just wait, man. It's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, this will be good. It'll be good. It'll be like you'll get my just like I won't know anything about it. You'll just have my total reaction.
You haven't mentioned anything to him about this?
Mm-mm. Well, very briefly.
All right. All right, welcome guys. Welcome back to Conspirinormal. It's your host Adam. Surfiel is here. He's doing this remote because it's a little later than usual. But we are stoked and getting ready for the Strange Realities Conference coming up here in Nashville, Tennessee, and online. So you have that option, October 15th through the 17th. And we are roughly going down the speakers list lately. And tonight we've got one of the speakers that will be there, hopefully, at the Strange Realities Conference. He's going to be speaking regardless. Nathan Isaac from the Penny Royal podcast is with us. Nathan, welcome back to Conspirinormal.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back on, man. I'm super excited to talk to you guys, and also, man, very, very honored to get invited down to speak at the Strange Realities Conference, man. I'm super excited.
Yeah, we're honored to have you. I mean, we really enjoy always speaking to you. We had you. It's been, I think, roughly a year now since we had you and Kyle and Darian on, and so there's been a lot, I guess, that has gone on since then. And I think back in October, you guys came out with the Penny Royal podcast, which, you know, we highly recommend if you're into just weird stuff about place and local weirdness. Definitely give it a listen. But so how has everything been going, and what's been going on? How's been the response to the show?
The response has been awesome, and it's we're still like this far on, you know, almost a year after the release, we're still getting like heavy numbers every week, and so like more and more people are discovering the thing. You know, and I've been doing a lot of interviews with people, and people have been interviewing me. But yeah, I mean, it's been great. You know what I mean? Like it's grown. The audience has really grown with it. And we've been doing the Liminal Lodge, which is our Patreon, but our private Facebook group that has, you know, quite a few members in it that are helping us sort of, you know, the shit that we found. It was so much content and so many documents, so many newspapers, articles and clippings that, yeah, it's way more than like three dudes, you know, and really most of the time, you know, it's me sorting through this stuff. But, you know, Darian's been trying to data mine a lot of it to make it quicker. But anyway, it's been great having a group of people that are helping us kind of go through this stuff and find more content in the newspaper articles. And you know, I did a FOIA request on Alexander Gaterma, you know, which is one of the characters, one of the figures that we uncovered here in town. And I didn't actually think I'd get anything out of a FOIA request for Alexander Guidestones. And then lo and behold, they responded with 1,662 pages, right? And, you know, I'm the only person that ever filed a FOIA request on Alexander Guidestones. And it was weird, you know, and there was just tons and tons of information in there about who he was and who they thought he was. And so I filed one with the CIA. I joined muckrock.com, and I've been filing FOIA requests like a fucking fiend. You know, it's just like, you know, it's like, why not? You know, why not file? You know, I filed some Casolaro FOIA requests too, which made me nervous to get any of that stuff out into the air, which definitely I want to talk about a little bit more. But yeah, man, the response has been fantastic. Lots and lots of really, really interesting people, and some really fucking crazy people have contacted me. I've had a lot of weird messages. I've had a lot of people send me leads. A lot of people send me things that have led us down new rabbit holes, and definitely helped us to find things that we would have never found. And some of them are really strange. But I've also just gotten just some batshit crazy messages from people about, I don't know, really crazy stuff. You know, the world, you know, a lot of apocalyptic stuff. Again, though, it's, you know, that's what, you know, Greg Newkirk, when he had came down here to hang out one weekend, we were talking about it. He was like, man, when you release this, you're going to get tons and tons of fucking messages from people. And there's going to be some significant stuff in there, you know, in all the fucking chaos. So, and he was right. It definitely was that way. So it's been weird. 2 weeks after the show came out, all these fucking signs appeared.
Yeah, I was supposed to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So that was strange, you know. And in the I think there were 7 total signs that appeared, and they were written by at least 3 different people. Based on what witnesses said, but they mentioned, you know, Sammy Catron, Lester Burns Jr., you know, all these people that are in the podcast, and they're saying, you know, don't forget Sammy Catron, you know, somebody call Lester Burns. This town is a cult. The cyber terrorists have taken over. Call the FBI, and then somebody spray painted all that stuff on top of a building, of a house right downtown when you drive into town. So they ended up tearing that building down. And then, man, fucking 3 weeks ago, it looks like the same writing. They wrote, MK Ultra, this town is a cult. You know, the mayor, everybody's involved. Nazis, right? And this one of the town historians sends that to me and says, hey, this appeared on this building downtown last night. He said, they're tearing the building down today. He said that building was where this attorney named Stanziano was assassinated a few years ago. He like walks out of this guy like that lived there, walks out and fucking shoots him dead in the street right beside Jarfly, like 50 feet from where the studio is, right? And about 2 months ago, I ran into this guy in the bar at Jarfly who was asking me about the podcast, and he said, I lived below the guy that shot Stanziano. And he said the day before he shot him, he told him that it was all part of MK Ultra, and that Stanziano was part of some secret group here in town. This whole narrative of the cult, you know, and that he had found out who were members and that he was trying to stop them. And then the kid said, you know, he thought he was crazy. And then the next day he went and shot the guy, killed him. So it was weird that on that house where that guy lived, somebody spray painted MK Ultra, you know, Nazis, this town is a cult. And then they tore it down. It's right beside the sheriff's department too, which is, you know, weird. a few years back, also, they found there was a dead body beside the sheriff's department in the dumpster for 3 weeks. And finally, somebody that was walking by said, God, the smell of this is so terrible. And when they opened it up, it was a dead body that they had dumped at the fucking sheriff's department. And it's next door to this house where this guy was that assassinated Stansy. Man, I'm in the shit down here.
What is going on in Somerset, Kentucky, dude? Like, I mean, does stuff like this happen in every small town? But I mean, it just seems that there is just some weird nexus shit going on there.
I don't know, man. I mean, and anybody can, if anyone questions this, you can fucking look it up in the newspapers. That's what's crazy. It's like,
right
there it is. You're like, what the fuck is this? So I don't know, man. I would like to know if other towns I don't think other towns are as violent as this, or weird. I don't know, but yeah. So the signs thing, that was weird.
What did some of the signs? They'd said stuff like this town is a cult and that type of stuff. That's what you said. Yeah,
town is a cult. They mentioned cyber terrorists, which I thought was weird.
Do you think this was a result of Pennyroyal, or do you think that this was a weird coincidence?
I do not believe that the people from the eyewitness accounts of who put the signs up, I absolutely don't believe they listened to the podcast. I think it's just not to get all woo-woo, with the whole thing, but again, I mean, that's what the podcast is about. This idea of information, also is information structures. And I really wonder if somehow we weren't broadcasting this out, and that some people that were schizophrenic or attuned, to hearing things or sensing things didn't somehow unconsciously pick up on that information. I mean, literally what they're writing about in the signs is the fucking podcast. They're talking about the Truman Show. And they're naming all these things that are examples of why reality is not real and why there's this veil over everything. It was just so crazy, that somebody was going around town. Of course, the cops, I asked them who they think it is. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's some dude who thinks people are in the tunnels underneath the town pushing shopping carts with microwaves trying to affect people's brains. And he's like, it's fucking ridiculous. And I'm like, for one thing, you just mentioned fucking tunnels underneath the town,
Right.
That's fucked up. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. Who knows, man? It was weird. And we just had a lot of, it's attracted a lot of weird people, and not to be insensitive to anyone that has schizophrenia, but there have been a lot of people with schizophrenia that have shown up. We had a fucking apocalyptic preacher who was running a doomsday cult in California shows up here 2 months ago, right? The Reverend White. And he was trying to move his cult to Somerset. Have you guys not seen this? Did you not?
No.
Man, people went nuts about this. I didn't even know about it. Someone on Twitter found this.
We got a couple of cults out here too. So, we got our own homegrown ones.
In Nashville? Like what kind of cults?
Project God.
Yeah, there's a cult that actually called Global Outreach. I have to
Development.
The Global Outreach Development. So the actual
GOD.
Yeah, GOD is the actual acronym. So yeah, and they actually pretty much own this neighborhood around here. Talk about like, I mean, should I say this, or talk about just like weird places. I mean, there's a neighborhood around here. I'm not going to give the name of it, but they pretty much own it. And it oddly enough it's an old African-American community that,
it was the black folks who worked at DuPont.
Right. And it has a name that's very reminiscent of Indian mounds, oddly enough. And there actually was an Indian mound very close to it at one point. Just to say that. But this cult has kind of they have revitalized the neighborhood, and they've built like these tall and skinny houses all over the place, and they have
That's what they call it, revitalize.
They have like an HVAC business that is like you'll see just like the fleets of the vans everywhere. So like the people work for the cult, and then they've got this little food truck that they all work in. They took this old school, which used to be an African American school during the segregation times. They took it and they turned it into their church, and now they've just like taken over the entire neighborhood.
That's
so, yeah.
And it's God.
Yeah, it's God. Yeah.
They're probably better at business than this end times cult you're talking about.
Yeah, they're just slightly better. Well, just recently, the leader and his wife got indicted for embezzling or exploiting TennCare, which is like the state kind of like free medical service here, kind of like a Medicaid kind of statewide thing. Yeah. And then we have also, I think we already mentioned this on another show, Greg Locke here in his church, which is also right down the road. He's the one that like is on CNN and stuff, like virulently like anti-mask and anti-vaccine and all that kind of stuff. So we've got a couple. I consider that a cult because he's got that charisma of a cult leader. Like he could Jim Jones the fuck out of his congregation anytime he wants to, probably. He's just doing it slowly.
Yeah, besides contributing to people dying of COVID, probably. They just ain't murdering like they do in Somerset, Kentucky.
Right.
It's true. Well, I mean, he's not the guy that's on the videos talking about like not masking up and stuff. Have you seen those videos?
Yeah, that's
him.
That's
him. He's world famous.
Yep. Yeah.
Saw one of those videos like an hour ago.
It started because he went into like a Dunkin' Donuts store and they asked him to mask. This is like during the depth of the lockdown, and he like started yelling at him and screaming at him, and got mad and started his little like one of those like car seat videos that you see. So we got a couple of homegrown ones here. But you probably got more per capita in Somerset. So
I mean that dude. It was weird that the dude showed up. He really was. I mean, part of a cult in California.
You said it's been a pretty hot summer there too, huh?
It's been a hot summer here, man. Yeah. Now, do you remember that show on HBO about ayahuasca? You know what I'm talking about?
Not in particular.
It's and it wasn't HBO. I'm sorry. It was Vice TV.
Going to their drug shows where they do all these different psychedelics.
The whole show was just focused on one ayahuasca church in America.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, so it was a pretty popular show, but it was super strange, and all these people came from all over to this guy, and he was kind of a religious leader, and he was administering ayahuasca therapies to people, and that was they wouldn't disclose where it was at, right? Guess where it fucking was? It was here in fucking Somerset. It was in Burnside.
Wow. Wow.
It's like one of the suburbs of Somerset. Yeah. And I was like, are you kidding me? What the fuck? Right?
Ayahuasca shamans in Somerset.
It's all like, it's just being, people are drawn to the place. Yeah.
Isn't there something about a panther or something?
Oh, about the black, you mean like the alien big cats?
Yeah. Isn't that associated with ayahuasca too?
Oh, is it?
Panther? I don't know. Maybe it's some rainforest shit. Maybe I'm just convoluting like a million.
I think I have heard people say that though. Dan Dutton, the artist that appears in the first season of Pennyroyal, who's very much tied into all the weirdness here, he just did an art show about, and he's really gotten involved in this too, because a lot of the stuff that I don't think he perceived it as paranormal or occult, at the time. It was sort of like part of the process of the art. And he and I are really close friends, and we've been working on that Fawn film that I mentioned, where he had this strange experience in Elkhorn City, and like Hellier is a suburb of Elkhorn City, and he thought that he encountered the archetype of Pan, which is super strange. But we've been working on a film about that experience, and I've talked to him a lot about the things I've found about Somerset and this town. His family is one of the old families, the old Pennsylvania Dutch families.
Okay.
That came here. They practiced Pow-wow magic.
I was about to ask you that. Yeah.
So that's a big thing. There's a witch that's part of his pantheon of work. That's Aunt Lou, and she was a Tartar. So the Duttons, the Tartars, and then 2 other families came from Virginia, but they were, German, Pennsylvania Dutch. And I asked him about, Dandyland, the farm that he lives on, that his family owned, but it's now referred to Dandyland. It's a sculpture park.
Right.
I asked him, because a lot of UFO sightings have happened there. That's where some of the skyfalls happened that were documented here in town.
Okay.
It's near some of the mounds, the Adena mounds that are located in Pulaski County or near there. So anyway, I asked him if his family had felt drawn to that piece of land, or if, how did they choose it? Did the land choose them? Did they choose the land? Did they just randomly pick it? And he said it was because there was this giant white oak, and that a lot of Pennsylvania Dutch families that practice powwow would always look for a giant white oak. And that motif of the oak is a major thing here in Somerset. So anyway, that's there's Oak Hill. Oakwood is the mental institution where they had all the weird savants that were channeling alien intelligences, and then I recently, 2 weeks ago, found out a whole new batch of stories and research and information about that part of the county and triangle UFOs and goblin sightings, which is totally weird, But anyway, but Dan, his most recent gallery opening was about corn and the mines and jaguars and black panthers, right? And so he connects in his research and his art the idea of black panther sightings and these alien big cats with corn, that they're often seen entering and exiting. People see them cross the road, but when you really look at the sightings, they're crossing the road from a cornfield into another cornfield. And this whole concept of the worship of corn in America, and
also seen in a liminal space in between the fields, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting that he had sort of pulled that. He's had his own Black Panther sightings. Again, with the whole Panther thing too, it's strange that that was the number one thing of all the people, and I interviewed hundreds of people in the county over a 3-year period. That was the number one thing that everyone had a story about: a panther sighting. They called them painters, it's with the dialect here, but it was these panthers. But no one has ever found a melanistic black panther north of Mexico since, I think, 1923, right?
Are there mountain lions naturally there?
There are bobcats and wildcats, are not mountain lions, but bobcats and wildcats. We actually have 3 bobcats on this farm that I just got, in a cave adjacent to the farm.
You got a cave?
We have 4 large caves on the property.
Oh shit, that's crazy.
Crazy, dude. It's a real weird sort of. It's a. Wait till you guys see it. When you guys come up here, you're gonna be like, "What the fuck is this, Nathan?" But it's a weird place. But anyway, but I don't think it's that. I don't think people are misidentifying these things. We're having tons of accounts of they're saying black panthers. That's what it is. It's a black panther, and They're from tail to nose the length of the road, right? So huge animals. But what is it? Because no one's ever killed one. No one's ever hit one. No one's ever found the remains of one. It's another one of these. It's like Bigfoot, and so. But they're often associated. The sightings are associated with, ancient earthworks, right? In England, there's the whole Beast of Dartmoor, and all those sightings. And so, there are no giant cats in England. It's a fucking island. So,
right.
So those definitely are alien big cats. But the same thing's happening here, and there are all these cornfields. The whole county is covered in cornfields. And that's what Dan is saying. It's like, somehow is it creating a liminal space, or is there some connection to the worship of corn? And so anyway, his most recent gallery show was about that. But I don't know, man. It's one of those fascinating things that you can't dismiss it, but where the fuck does it fit into all of this? I don't know. But it is fascinating now.
Yeah, you hear the stories about the errant cats a lot. That is a big Fortean creature that people see all the time. Is the thing is that that's why I asked about the mountain lions. I mean, it's like I'm sure that they're probably there because they've been spotted here. So I mean they're more widespread. They're more widespread, I think, than people think, and that's a natural animal. So,
and cougars and shit like that.
But it makes me think about the Bell Witch and however you feel about that story. I mean, the first in the folklore, in the story, the first manifestation, it also has to do with an Indian mound, and it also has to do with a large. In that story, it's more like a dog-like creature, but also black, similar, and there was some reference to the Bell Witch as the black dog and those type of things too. So all that stuff, I think, is like just comes out of folklore. But
I totally agree, and there are a ton of black dog sightings here and dogman sightings in this area, which are that's one of those things I didn't expect to find. I didn't expect to find a bunch of dogman sightings, but I definitely did, and just like black dog sightings, so
right, which that's another motif in the British Isles too.
Yeah,
it's the black dog, Hound of the Baskervilles plays on that.
Yeah.
So
hellhounds,
yeah.
Hellhound on my trail.
Another strange thing too here in Somerset, on the border of Casey County and Somerset. Casey County is full of Amish. It's a huge Amish community, but they right on the border there, turn of the century, there were all of these reports of a dog killer, right? Like this thing that was roaming the woods for I think it was a 3-week period, and it killed over 60 dogs.
God damn.
It decapitated the dogs, right? Ate their heads off. They didn't find the heads. And there are tons of newspaper stories about this. And it had started in Texas and had a definite line of migration up through the South into Kentucky. And then it happened here in Casey County, and they formed a hunting party to find the thing. And the reports are super interesting because when they actually cornered what they thought it was, the people that were in the group that cornered it all saw the thing as a different thing. Like their descriptions of it were all different. So it's like 10 different descriptions. And then they shot it. They thought they killed it. It got away, and then it was never heard from again. And it was just this like short period of time that this thing seemed to like pop into our reality and then pop out of our reality after creating all this chaos.
There's a lot about that too in with Bigfoot. Dogs supposedly hate Bigfoot. Bigfoot hates dogs. And then you've got the whole beginning of the Mothman story where Mothman is encountered by a guy with a dog, and the dog runs after it, and then the people that first see Mothman, I believe, it's they see a dog dead on the side of the road. You know, there's some, since we're in the dog days, I guess there's a lot of dog imagery in a lot of those stories too.
Well, so one of the strange things that we found after the podcast came out too, I was starting to, I collected all these stories and I didn't really know how some of it fit in, but one of the things was that there are all of these accounts of dog sacrifices here in Pulaski County, right? And down in McCrew, which is south. And people would find in the caves, in the mines, dogs wrapped in barbed wire. That would be, a half a mile into a mine that had been burned on an altar. Those were some of the stories I was hearing. Just recently, a group of people were climbing at some of the caves near where Hellier did, shot some of their stuff. And they came upon a tarp that had like 6 or 8 dogs dead, wrapped up outside the cave, right? Which is really a strange thing. We have Dog Slaughter Falls down here. That's adjacent to Cumberland Falls. And it was always rumored to be a place where Paleolithic or Paleo-Indian tribes had sacrificed dogs, right? Now, when you start talking about dog sacrifice, you have to consider the idea that it could be connected to Hecate.
You stole what I was going to say, yeah.
Right. So right. Then when you start looking at Hecate and all of the stuff that's happening, you got to start thinking, is somebody down here an acolyte, or some type of Hecate? Is there Hecate worship going on?
Have you ever talked to Walter Bosley, Nathan?
Oh yeah, dude, Walter and I, yeah. So we got together and I think he digs it because he was talking about if he'd known about this stuff going on when he was in Ohio stationed.
He was at Wright-Patterson, yeah.
Yeah. He's going to be in the second season of Pennyroyal.
Okay, good. There's Nick Redfern talks about in one of his books, I forget which one, he talks about how in England there was a cult that was doing that, sacrificing dogs, and they worshipped Hecate as a chthonic deity. And
well, the whole thing, the reason I found Bosley and Spence, right, was because of the Empire of the Will. And the sort of similarities between those murders that occurred, in San Bernardino in 1913, and then the murders that were happening here, So, and obviously Bosley, relates some of this stuff to Hecate and a cult of Hecate. So, I don't know, man. It's strange. Like there are a lot of dog sacrifices in a history of dead dogs here, and then you mix this in with the Downard research, right? And that entering this whole thing with Sirius,
the dog star.
Yeah, dude. And think about this shit, right? So I'm researching fucking magical correspondences, and I don't practice any magic, but obviously have been researching it because of all the connections between these things. And when you look at I think it was the magical correspondences of Sirius, right? The plant that corresponds with Sirius is, guess what? Fucking pennyroyal. And the stone that corresponds with it is quartz, right? So it was another one. I was like, what the fuck is this? Why would this, and especially when we got deeper into the Sirius rising stuff. And later I will tell you something that's going to blow your fucking mind that we just found out that relates to Grimstad and to Pennyroyal directly, right? Like it's so crazy, dude. I still don't know how to process it. So anyway,
as far as like the dog murders And cryptids. I mean, what better way to let us know that whatever it is not our friend?
Yeah. Right.
Than to kill our domestic animals like that. I mean, that's like...
Yeah. Well, dogs are our protectors, and there are early warning systems and that type of thing. Yeah.
The front lines.
And there's such a ingrained relationship between man and dog that, I mean, they were the first animal. I mean, what, 35,000 years or something? I mean, you're talking about a long ass time.
That's interesting because that probably, not just domestic animals, but like animal husbandry, that's kind of it predates agriculture, and that's kind of one of the first things setting us apart, that fall from Eden or whatever. And so maybe it has something to do with that.
No one's ever really looked at that, though. Well, why? Like, really, though, why the Bigfoot accounts where there's the killing of dogs, all these alien encounters where dogs are found dead,
Yeah, we just had David Perkins on talking about, the history of cattle mutilation and beyond that to like horses and other animals too.
Yeah. I think there's something to it. I mean, I don't know what it is, but there's just too many accounts of all of this stuff, and too many occult references to, even locally, to this that, I don't think we can discount it. I don't know where it fits. And this is in the second season of Pennyroyal. And again, I'm going to reveal a bunch of things to you guys that are big things in the second season, but I don't think it hurts the story to talk about them because you have to see it in the whole context. And then you're like, Jesus Christ, right? To talk about them individually, it's still incredibly fascinating, but like when you string them together, it's just, I don't know what the fuck it is, but so the first time that Downard is mentioned in print, is in Cosmic Trigger. Not a newspaper article, I'm saying, but actually someone referencing, James Shelby Downard, his conspiracy theories, is in Robert Anton Wilson's Cosmic Trigger. So Grimstad sends, the Illuminatus trilogy comes out. They talk about the number 23 a lot in there. And so a lot of people started sending Robert Anton Wilson, crazy synchronicities with the number 23. So he actually references in Cosmic Trigger a letter he receives, a clipping from a UFO journal, a British UFO journal, which is really, it's the Fortean News. Actually, it was called the News. And it eventually became the Fortean Times. And so he sends this article to Robert Anton Wilson about a group of channelers in England who are channeling an entity called Jiro, Jiro, right? And the entity mentions the number 23 and a bunch of other weird shit. But then after that, he sends that first, and then he sends the Downard Sirius Rising tapes, right? And so there's this, 2 or 3 paragraphs in Cosmic Trigger, which obviously is a majorly famous word. That's where the Starseed stuff gets started, really, I think, or at least is popularized. And I thought, Adam Go-Rightly and I have been corresponding quite a bit and exchanging a lot of information that we've been, finding. And he had mentioned that there was the possibility that there were more than one Sirius Rising tape, and the other ones possibly involved channeling, right? And that Michael Hoffman, there was this idea that Michael Hoffman could be involved. Definitely that Grimstad was involved, but they're down in St. Petersburg in 1974 with Charles Saunders, and they're setting up, which I don't have any direct evidence for this, but I think they were involved in setting up a chapter of the what is it, the American Socialist Party, or the Socialist the American, I don't want to say American Nazi Party, but
I think it's an offshoot though of, it's like one of the offshoots of the American Nazi Party.
Yeah.
It makes it sound so innocent, doesn't it?
Right. And I'm not calling them Nazis. I want to establish for the record, I'm not, on the air calling them Nazis. But so anyway, they're down there, and that's the thing, when he sends the article to Robert Anton Wilson, he says, W.N. Grimstad of St. Petersburg, Florida, right? So it's, it verifies that he's down there at that time. So, when we got deeper into the pennyroyal mystery, channeling came up, especially with Oakwood and the group of savants that were at this experimental mental health facility, right? That there were 9 of them, and they were channeling these alien intelligences.
Of course there were 9 of them. Of course.
Which I'm like, what the fuck is this? And Dan Dutton is involved in that. Dan Dutton is one of the witnesses to it. And
yeah. I remember that from the show, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, did his contact with those channeled beings, that he can't remember what happened at this experimental mental health facility called Oakwood, and you think of the Oak King and Pan and all that shit, and how much his work focuses on Pan. But, he says after that experience, he went home, and that day had the inspiration for all of these other works that were to come, including, the fawn, the Pan that ties into a lot of the weirdness that's happened. And the rebirth of Pan, again, William Grimstad. So it was weird that channeling kept coming up. So I was like, man, we've got to get this Jiro article. I've got to find this. I've got to see what it was that was so important in that article that he had to send it to Robert Anton Wilson. So for the last year, I've been looking for it. I've bought anthologies of the Fortean Times, and I could never get it, could never find that specific article. And then a member of the lodge of our Patreon group, of the Liminal Lodge, who had just recently joined, tells me, "Oh, I think I have an anthology of the first few years of that. Let me dig it out and see if I have it." And he did. So he copies it, he sends it to me, and it's called Portrait of a Fault Zone. Okay. And I'm like, well, okay, what is it? It's 2 parts, and it's written by Paul Devereux and Andrew York, right? And Paul Devereux is really famous because he edited The Lay Hunter, and it was big into the 1960s, 1970s.
Yeah, Randall Carlson is really big on his stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So, a very established writer, right? And very established researcher about telluric energies, ley lines, all that stuff. Ancient.
Yes, especially in British Isles and stuff. He's kind of like the last really big figure from that Earth Mysteries movement that's still out there, relevant, and not, pretty right-wing.
Yes, yeah. Man, God, I'm not going to go off on a tangent yet. I want to mention something to you, too. Don't let me forget to talk about David Southwell. I want to mention David Southwell. But so anyway, I get this article, and I start reading it, and I'm like, holy fuck, right? It is about this specific part of England. It's Leicestershire, right? And they focus on it because it has all of this high strangeness. And they go into the research, the story, and they talk about meteorites landing there. Then the next section is about geomagnetic anomalies, right? And then the next section is about, and as you're reading it, it is the trajectory of our research in pennyroyal to this specific area. And he keeps talking about the relationship between people and place and people. And it's this whole concept of the landscape and how the landscape is affecting people. And it gets into UFO sightings, seismic activity, a lot of like geomagnetism, quartz is involved, but it's like it is fucking pennyroyal in 1974 in Leicestershire. It even gets into this whole contactee movement where they start channeling these entities, and one of which was Giro, but another one was named Lear. And Leicestershire is where King Lear, the historical King Lear, lived. There was I think it was Robert Graves who said that there was a vault underneath the Soar River, Soar, which goes through that area, and that King Lear was buried there, and that he worshipped the Roman god Janus, the two-faced god. And people were like, that's fucking ridiculous, right? But Paul Devereux mentions that story. And then I found, once I started researching this, they did find a vault underneath the Soar River with idols to Janus, which confirmed their belief, right? So that you've got these entities that are being channeled in that area, calling themselves Lear, right? And then Giro, the number 23 pops up. Anyway, I'll send these. It's a 2-part series about this, but it talks about cults in that area that worship the oak, and that they sacrificed oaks. And there's this idea of, he doesn't come out and say Pan, but this idea of an earth spirit, that's communicating with people. It's very much, it crosses. It sort of crosses content with what Grimstad was researching to create the rebirth, to write the rebirth of Pan, right? And obviously, Serfiel, you've found some amazing research about where that really comes from, right? But I'm telling you, man, it is super strange that William Grimstad sent Robert Anton Wilson an article from the Fortean Times that literally mirrors the first season of Pennyroyal. Even in terms of where in the story they talk about the channeling, where they're talking about the occults, where they're talking, the only thing he doesn't talk about is murders. He literally sent Robert Anton Wilson an article that is Pennyroyal in England in 1974, right? 1975. But also that same time period is when Gaterma shows up here in Somerset, right? And then 1975 is when, we're going to talk about Charles Hayes, but Charles Hayes was active, was running weapons, trafficking in rocket launchers,
Do we want to talk about him now? And since we brought him up, let's talk about him now. Yeah.
So Charles Hayes, we found all the stuff about Gaterma, which was strange, that he was possibly an ex-Nazi, shows up in Somerset in 1975, buys that mine from Spiro Agnew, that they had bought with Nixon re-election campaign money, which...
Yeah, and there's some continuity of government stuff going on with that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was all really weird to find in Somerset. And then, we're researching all this stuff, finding all these documents, and someone joined our Lindell Lodge, and they really, it looked like they just created a Facebook account to send us this one message, right? And the message was, have you looked at Charles Hayes? And when they sent that, the article that they attached was about the largest gemstone seizure in U.S. history, right, by U.S. Customs. And it was $20 million in uncut gemstones, something crazy. And so this guy from Nancy, Kentucky, here in Pulaski County, right, is the guy that was involved in it. And he says that they used a Berea college student as a mule to transport the gemstones from Brazil. And then Charles Hayes received them. He says he was an international attorney in Brazil for 5 years, from 1980 to 1985. And he gets involved, and the U.S. government seizes these gemstones, and then he asks for restitution. He wants 10%, $2 million as a finder's fee, for these gemstones. And they're crazy newspaper articles about this. So this starts me thinking, well, holy shit, right? We found Gaterma. Now you're telling me there's a gemstone smuggler here in Pulaski County. But when you look into Charles Hayes, you find out that he's much more than a gemstone smuggler, right? You find out that this guy, supposedly, back in the 60s, the articles about him, he was running a place called the Beckett Hotel, and he got in trouble for not having an entertainment license. But really what he was running was a brothel, and they were doing honey trap sort of operations with politicians, cops, and getting dirt on them. He got in trouble over that in the I think it was the 50s through the 60s. There were lots of news stories about that. In the mid 70s, he gets caught trafficking arms. Okay. And we're not talking shotguns and hunting rifles. He got busted trafficking rocket launchers in Pulaski County, right? In the mid 70s.
What in the hell?
Right. So you're like, what the fuck is this? And I'm like, this is strange. And then there's the gemstone stuff in 1985, right? So at that point, you're thinking, I definitely was thinking, is this guy fucking an intelligence agent? Is he part of the CIA? So
to get rocket launchers, you're probably barking up the right tree there. In the 1980s,
yeah, dude.
Yeah, that was either probably going to the Contras or it was going to Afghanistan.
Right.
Who knows?
Well, so just in terms of Pulaski County, they ended up consolidating the high schools here, the county high schools, into Pulaski County High School. There used to be a Nancy High School. Well, when they consolidated the high schools, that building lay dormant. Well, Charles Hayes, his name is Chalmer Charles Hayes, but he goes by Chuck Hayes. And he bought the Nancy High School and began to store weapons underneath the fucking basketball court. And I've interviewed people that broke in, they found it. He had snow ski machines, right? Like snowmobiles, and shit like that it doesn't snow enough down here for those guns. Like weird things were stored there. And he always represented himself as a scrap dealer. Mm-hmm. And so in 1991, or I guess this was a little late, between 88 and 1991, he purchased some equipment at an auction in Lexington, Kentucky. It was a government auction for computers. And he bought these computers for $45 on a pallet. And right after he bought the computers, for some reason, the government realized that they hadn't wiped the hard drives. So they asked him for the computers back. And this is all documented, right? They're like, give us the computers back. And he says, no, I fucking bought these things. Right.
What year is this again? What year is this?
I think the actual action I'm talking about came in 1991, right? Okay. But it was like 1990, 1991.
But he was already doing all this weird shit, had already been...
All this other weird shit, with the government has happened.
And he had somehow, it was well known he was a semi or fully illegal arms dealer, but somehow he's not incarcerated or doesn't really get in trouble.
I mean, again, how in the world, he's charged in the 50s and 60s running these scams where he's getting people, evidence of people with prostitutes, right? Then in the 70s, he's an arm trafficer. Then in the 80s, he's trafficking uncut gemstones from Brazil.
Yeah, he's a
right?
player.
So then in 1991, he buys this computer equipment. They want it back. He won't give it to them. They tell him if he doesn't give it to them, they're going to arrest him. He tells them to go fuck themselves. And then the FBI raids his farm in Nancy, takes the computer equipment, wipes it, gives it back to him. He sues the government, and they pay him $200,000 in restitution. Okay? This is all documented in the news stories. So then it comes out that he is possibly, and he's telling everybody this, that he is an ex-CIA contractor, and that he has been a contractor for the CIA for 42 years. And that when he was in Brazil in the 1980s, what he was really doing was selling the Promise software. He was one of the brokers for Inslaw and was selling it to the Brazilian government. And they paid him for the Promise software with these uncut gems, right? And so when you look at this, the U.S. government helped topple the Brazilian government in 1985, right at the time that he got the fuck out and came back to Pulaski.
Yeah, that was the year that the military gave up power and it switched back to a civilian government. It's 1985. Yeah. So if anyone's not familiar with the Promise software, I mean, you can go back and listen to our show with Ken Thomas about this. I mean, the whole Octopus and the Indian reservation out in California, the Cabazon Indian Reservation, which is incidentally where the Brontosaurus and the Tyrannosaurus Rex are. That's not too far away from
Pee-wee's Dinosaurs. I was just there.
Yeah, you're right.
Is that really where that is?
Yeah, that's right outside the Cabazon Indian Reservation. And it's not very far from the Integratron and Giant Rock either. It's all kind of there in that same area. Yeah. I went out there with Walter Bosley and Greg Bishop back in like 3 years ago when I was out in California. The Surfiel just did that. He went to both places about a few weeks ago.
Those pictures were cool too that he put.
When there was a computer that was buried, I dug it up and it had Promise software on it.
Well, is Whack and Hunt still out there?
I don't know, but that's where Whack and Hunt secured. They were on the Indian reservation because they could get away with a lot of weapons testing on the Indian reservation grounds.
Just the place in general is a place to get ducked off. It's like there's some real deal desert rats out there. It's like outside of Palm Springs, 29 Palms and all that. There's some people really ducked off.
Yeah. Well, so I do want to talk about Danny Casolaro a little bit because, this is, the Casolaro story of the octopus and, Ken Thomas eventually publishing it. But, that's I think that's one of the biggest for people that are real conspiracy theorists in terms of researchers. There are a lot of conspiracy theorists out there. They're on YouTube reading a lot of headlines and watching fifth dimensional videos that when I ask them, do you know who Downard is or do you know any of this? They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you're not really a researcher. You're just like, you're reading Facebook headlines, and spreading misinformation. But for people that obviously are into conspiracy theory, which I don't think they're really conspiracy theories. I mean, there's something happening, but Casolaro's octopus is one of the most famous, And so Chuck Hayes, it is the Promise software that was on those computers that were wiped, right? And so he ends up getting called to testify in 1992 in the Inslaw case in Chicago. And the government attorneys are like, he's telling everybody, I'm an ex-CIA contractor. And my cover name was Charles Lawson. And here's my CIA ID. And they're like, fuck, he's not. It's a lie. He's just a Pulaski County, Kentucky scrap dealer, is what they say. He's a junk dealer. And he's full of shit. And then he opens his mouth and starts to talk. And they enacted the National Security Act. And no one knows what happened after that, right? So then there are records that he was consulted in the investigation in Mena, Arkansas, that connects to Bill Clinton and all this stuff, where they were flying cocaine down to the Sandinistas, right?
Yeah, that was all part of Iran-Contra. Yeah.
Yes, right. So guess who was the guy that gave them that information? It was fucking Chuck Hayes. Is listed as one of the witnesses that told them to look at Mena, right?
That's where Barry Seal was flying out of, was Mena.
Yeah. What's the movie? American.
I can't remember the name of it, but it was with Tom Cruise. But the original name of the movie was going to be Mena.
Oh, really?
No shit.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, so, Chuck Hayes is the guy that kind of puts them onto this. And he says that he was one of the CIA pilots, because he was in the Air Force, right? And he says he realized that he was flying a shipment of cocaine down to the Sandinistas to exchange, it, and dumped it out on the runway in Mena and got into a firefight, and a bunch of people got killed and he escaped, right? So, that's another one of those weird stories, but the information that he gave investigators in Arkansas was real, and so that was one of the things that was mentioned. A lot of what I'm about to say comes from Dick Russell, who was a great journalist, researcher. He wrote an article for the High Times. And I know a lot of people will be like, oh, fuck the High Times, right? But it's kind of like Playboy, there were a lot of like actually well-researched articles.
They had a lot of cool stuff back in the day.
Yeah. Back, now I wouldn't think so, but back in the day, it definitely was. So Dick Russell did an article called Spook Wars in Cyberspace. And it's a great fucking article. And he lays out this whole connection between Chuck Hayes and Inslaw, because in 1991, it was right after all this stuff happened with the U.S. government raiding his farm and everything. About a month before Danny Casolaro was found dead in Martinsburg, which again, I've always heard that he had 4 gashes on each arm, which were the octopus arms, 4 and 4. Which who knows if that's even true, but it's one of those urban legends where it's like he's looking for the octopus and they murder him that way, as a symbol.
I've never heard that part.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I came across was about the 4 gashes on each arm.
That's very Downardian.
Right. There's this weird, symbolism to it. So they looked at his phone records, and he had hundreds of phone calls to, guess who? Chuck Hayes, in the months before his death. And so it's believed that Chuck Hayes provided him with the information about the Promise software. Okay. And what's crazy is that Chuck Hayes starts telling everybody and starts coming out in these publications throughout America, some of these like underground publications and on the internet, that he is the founder of a group called the Fifth Column, and that they got their hands on the Promise software, and because he had been one of the people selling it, and he was, he knew how to hack, and he and a group of ex-CIA contractors that had been fucked by the CIA formed this Fifth Column, and they started to they outsourced a Cray supercomputer from all of the computer equipment that he was going around to various government auctions. They were able to piece together a Cray supercomputer. Now, I wondered why the Cray supercomputer? What connection is that to any of this stuff? Why that detail? But when you look up the Cray supercomputer, you find out that It is the super. I had to buy it was like a $35 or $40 paper that was only available from a government contractor about the Cray supercomputers in the 90s that were used to handle the 16 SATCOM government satellites, right? And so there is this weird connection between the Cray supercomputer. So the story goes that he in the fifth column built this Cray supercomputer in the back of a fucking semi-trailer in Pulaski County and started driving it around so that the government could never find it. And it was driving around Kentucky. It was driving around Pulaski County. And there's an episode in the X-Files where there's a supercomputer in the back of a semi where they have the lone gunman are in the episode, right? That's based on this fucking story, okay? And when you dig deeper into the Casolaro stuff and you find everything about Michael Riscontiuto or whatever his name is, the guy out there on the reservations, and the yellow lodges that Ken Thomas mentions, that's why the X-Files have all of those episodes where they're on the Indian reservation, because they're doing these extra governmental, that's unregulated by the U.S. government research.
Right. Yeah, that stuff gets into the popular culture. Yeah.
Yeah. And so but I didn't realize the supercomputer in the semi-trailer was from Chuck Hayes in Pulaski County, right?
So these supercomputers would be linking to the satellites.
Yeah.
And getting compromising information that they could then use.
Yes. Yeah. But so they were tracking, the Promise software tracked financial information and criminal information. So they went to all these governments around the world and told them, your banks are not communicating with each other, because no one knew that they were working with the CIA. Inslaw was just like, they were using CIA contractors as salesmen, but they were going in here, and Chuck Hayes was one of them. They were going into these governments like Brazil or wherever, even smaller municipalities, and saying, look, none of your banks are communicating. Everything's on paper. Digitize it, and you'll have all this information at your hands.
Yeah, and it was a back door to spy on these countries. Yeah.
And that's what, no one knew that Inslaw had contracted with the CIA.
Right.
And we only know that because the fucking U.S. government welched on paying the last $6 million to Inslaw, and so
and the people that made the software, they didn't know that it was being used in that way, but the CIA or whoever had actually figured out that there was a way that this software could be used to spy because of just the way it was designed. So it was kind of just a fluke that it even happened in the first place.
Yeah. But supposedly Chuck Hayes, once he got his hands on it, he added another backdoor. Supposedly, Riscontiuto or whatever, how you say it.
I think it's Riconosciuto.
Riconosciuto.
Yeah.
That he added a backdoor, right? Because he was going to go in and do this. But then Chuck Hayes in the fifth column, they also did. So Chuck Hayes was using the Promise software to look at all these financial transactions of U.S. senators, politicians, and finding patterns that showed that they were taking, that they were corrupt. And during the period, I think it was, let me see here. Yeah. And it was 60 U.S. senators and U.S. representatives announced their retirements just before the 1996 elections. And supposedly that's because between 1991 and 1996, Chuck Hayes and this group of ex-CIA contractors were sending manila envelopes to these senators showing that they had caught them and giving them 24 hours to resign, right? And this gave him the name, the Angel of Death, right, is how they referred to it.
Talk about just like absolute power.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, that's a powerful position for one guy. it had to have been a good mix of senators, and I mean 60 senators. I mean that's a lot. So it had to have been a much more like representatives, because it wouldn't even put a dent. Yeah.
Yeah, if it was too many senators, it would shift power.
Right, exactly. Yeah. This was just enough to cause some chaos, which I think is really what guys like this really like to do, is just to cause chaos, because they learn how to do this in other countries.
Yes.
You talking about him being down in Brazil? Yeah.
And chickens come home to roost.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just watched the movie The Siege the other night again. Where Bruce Willis, they declare martial law, and Denzel Washington was trying to trace it down. Turns out the terrorists were all trained by the U.S.
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but yeah, I remember I remember it. Yeah,
it's the same sort of thing, But anyway, in 1996, at the height of this happening, the U.S. government, the FBI busts Hayes for trying to hire an undercover FBI agent who was portraying himself as a hitman. He hires him supposedly for $100 to murder his son. Okay. So they set him up in this murder for hire scheme, and the star witness is a God, what is his name? Is it
that's a cheap hitman.
Yeah.
Well, so the guy says to him in the recordings that he wants $5,000 once it's done, but $100 up front. And so Hayes has always maintained that he knew that it was an undercover FBI agent. And the tapes that they used to convict him, he says, "I know you're an FBI agent. It's ridiculous that you want me to give you $100 to kill my son, but fuck it. Here's $100, you fucking FBI agent." And they use that to do it, supposedly, right? The guy that set it up for him, though, let me find this here. His name was, let's see here. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, Lawrence Myers. He's a journalist from California who was in a mental institution for 10 years at one point, and also was an FBI informant. And he testified in another murder for hire case where the FBI set up a politician in Knoxville, Tennessee. And the same thing, where it's the same journalist saying, he asked me to find a hitman for him. So they used that same guy in the Chalmer Hayes case, in the Chuck Hayes case. So they try to do an appeal to impeach that witness, and it doesn't work. They still convict him. They still say that he wasn't a CIA agent. He ends up going to jail. I can't find that Chuck Hayes is dead. He's 86 years old, and I think he's in a old folks home here in Pulaski.
Mm-hmm. Really?
I can find the guy, right? All right. So here's to me, it's fucked up enough that we find Hayes here in Pulaski County tied to the Casolaro shit, right? Tied to the Promise software. But online, the main guy that is maintaining all of this information and all these websites about Chuck Hayes is a guy named J. Orlin Grobby, right? And I thought, well, this guy must live here in the area because he has all these websites. He's maintained all these things about Chuck Hayes' innocence. Turns out that he is one of the most famous U.S. financial instrument engineers ever. He created the U.S. derivatives futures market in the 80s, right? Like, he is the guy that created all of these formulas to do all this derivative trading. And his best friend was Chuck Hayes. And he came to Pulaski County all the time and hung out with him. And I think he is a member of the Fifth Column because he was a huge supporter of chaos theory in financial markets. And when you dig into this guy, you find out that in 1985, he is the originator of the concept of cryptocurrency, of digital currencies, right? Now, Satoshi published the white paper about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and blockchain, right? But in 1985, Grabby published a paper about digital currencies, and he didn't use the phrase blockchain, but basically a peer-to-peer system that would allow people to exchange money digitally through cryptography, right? Through this randomness, and that by doing this, they would be able to destabilize the financial markets that were so. It's this whole thing that Chuck Hayes was doing, right? You find these guys talking about this stuff. You know, he's quoted here in Pulaski County referring to Hal Rogers as helicopter guy, because everywhere he went to, he flew around a helicopter. You know, like, he's here in Pulaski County. He's working with Chuck Hayes. He's planning all this shit out. And immediately when I read that he was the originator of the concept of digital cash and digital currencies, I thought, could he be Satoshi, right? And so when I started looking into that, there are other people that believe the same thing. And they took Satoshi's white paper and J. Orlin Grobby's white paper and did a semantic textual analysis and found that it is the same author, right? And the theory is that he and Chuck Hayes came up with fucking Bitcoin and blockchain, and then in 2008 when Orlin Grobby died, that it was a dead man's switch. And that's what caused the blockchain to go into effect. And that's why no one has ever touched Satoshi's wallet. No one's ever withdrawn any money, because it was a fucking dead guy that died 4 years before it ever went into effect. And so Bitcoin and blockchain were developed with Chuck Hayes in the fifth column here in fucking Pulaski County, man.
What is going on in Pulaski County, Kentucky, man? Holy shit!
Weird, man? I mean, like,
that's
well, and Charles Hayes could have. These guys could have just used these skills to make money, like I'm sure a lot of other ex-CIA agents did.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But obviously they did have some ideological pretensions, you know, and they believed in a cause, and they seem like kind of like the real-life versions of, like, characters in Illuminatus or something. These guys are like libertarian Discordians just trying to, you know, upset the whole order.
Well, you know, J. Orlin Grobby actually has an article about Discordianism. He talks about embracing Eris and this whole thing with chaos. And that was his big obsession, was chaos in the financial markets and this idea of randomness. You know, and then that's so weird that we find that and find the connections to Chuck Hayes and that they were working together so tightly. And then all of our stuff with, you know, cybernetics and randomness and the things that Pennyroyal has been based on. Here's a really fucking crazy thing. You know, after we put out the show, we received some strange documents. I won't say from who, but we've talked about this before. But, you know, we received some weird documents that involve, gold certificates, the transfer of gold from the Philippines to the United States to Switzerland. Someone randomly came to Pulaski County and overheard Darian and I talking about this data mining software that we had developed to data mine the Gaterma stuff to try to figure out, you know, if there were any patterns. They heard us talking about the Philippines because of Gaterma coming from the Philippines. And this particular individual gave us these documents on a clean USB drive and basically said, see what you can find out. And I thought there was nothing to it. But then when we looked at the fucking documents, I was like, holy fucking shit. I thought we were going to get raided by the feds. Because there in these documents, there are reproductions of federal treasury certificates. And there's just hundreds of bank accounts, all of the SWIFT numbers, all of the transfers, all these emails. And they involve some individuals that were CIA agents that were connected to Willis Carto in Escondido, California, right? And when we got the documents too, a lot of the shit in there was stuff that we were researching. Even Stephen Snyder is mentioned in the documents. The article that caused me to contact Stephen is referenced in the article, and Stephen is referenced. And the documents were sealed in 2017, right? And it was like, there's shit in there about the Sovereign Order of St. John, which we were researching. There's shit in there about Cleve Baxter and the Cosmos Club and talking to plants. There's a fucking memo about Mitch McConnell. And so these documents were found in California, and yet one of the main things is about a Kentucky senator, right? And the whole gold certificate thing was strange because here we are researching Downard and all the gold certificates that are mentioned in, you know, Carnivals of Life and Death, and in an early draft of Carnivals of Life and Death that they took out this section about gold certificates from the Philippines, right? And then what we're really talking about is Yamashita's gold, you know, the World War II gold. So, you know, we get these documents and I'm like, what the fuck is this? What does this mean? And a lot of the second season deals with us trying to understand what this is. But it dawned on us recently after we found all the Chuck Hayes stuff and the Promise stuff. And this is going to sound completely fucking paranoid, all right? And I just reread Ken Thomas's article about paranoia. I think is it Ken Thomas that writes that in the Suppressed Ideas book? You know what I'm talking about?
Secrets and Suppressed.
Yeah. No, it's not him. It's Carrie Thornley. It's Carrie Thornley's essay about paranoia as a form of heightened awareness, right? And in context with the JFK assassination. But I was just reading it and I was like, you know, it's like, this sounds totally crazy. And why? Why would they even do this? But is it possible? And Darian, you know, that works on all this stuff with me, he was like, what if someone thought that we already knew about Chuck Hayes, right? That, you know, we're researching all these people in the county, that somehow we had already found Chuck Hayes, and that we kept talking about this data mining software that we were using to analyze all these documents, right? And see, they don't know how many copies of the Promise software Chuck Hayes made. And they don't know that we didn't find Chuck Hayes in an old folks home and that he gave us the software, and that the software we were using to data mine all these documents was the Promise software. So someone gives us these documents that have hundreds, you know, thousands of financial accounts and says, why don't you take a look at it and see what patterns you can find to see if the software that we were using was the Promise software, right? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's weird, right? like on top of all the other shit that's been fucking happening, to have this stuff surface, especially the fucking Chuck Hayes stuff, right? You know, it's like, what is this? You know, like, what the fuck is going on? I don't know.
It's amazing. There's you got definitely some shit there. I mean, I don't know honestly what to think. Be true, you know. Yeah. So you mentioned this other guy, David Southwell.
Oh yeah, the last
well.
Yeah, I want to say like that David Southwell. You know, he is a British author, a very well known British author, and he does all of this. He writes about Hookland, and people should check it out on Twitter. He's got a website and stuff, but it's an area that he focuses on. But he has written all this stuff, and I talked to him there's a podcast called Rejected Religion that analyzed a bunch of this high strangeness stuff and connected these things. And that they were going to have Marco Visconti, who's a ceremonial magician in England, on, and then David Southwell and me to talk about this idea of place and the way that it affects people. But we were prepping for the interview, and I got to talk to David, and he mentioned all of these really fantastic concepts that I hadn't even thought about. You know, the way that Scooby-Doo is all about the concept of the spirit of place, right? And he went into this whole analysis that I thought was fantastic. But when you really look at David Southwell's work, he talks a lot about the encroachment of fascism and these right-wing people that are stealing ideas from the Fortean community, right? And from magicians and things, and using it to spread their ideas, right? And there's definitely a correlation with that, with the Downer material. But his big banner, his big thing is, you know, and this is what's so strange in talking to him. You know, at the end of Pennyroyal, I was really trying to stress the idea of re-enchantment in America, right? And that people should find, you know, they should re-enchant their lives, you know, and find magic in the places that they lived, right? But David Southwell's big thing is re-enchantment is resistance. And so that there are it's the whole Peter Levenda shit, right? That there is this egregore of fascism, that there is this encroaching force in human civilization that is this thing, that is the forces of extreme order and fascism, and that we need to rediscover re-enchantment and magic in our lives, and not literally magic necessarily, but just the magical nature of the world, you know, and that's a form of resistance against all of this, all the fucking crazy shit that's happening right now. And I think that's a good message, you know. It's something that I really want to stress in the second season of Pennyroyal, you know, and to really champion what David Southwell is saying is that, you know, re-enchantment really is resistance, especially now, you know. Especially with all the fucking Trump shit, you know, and all this stuff that just happened, you know. So I don't know, man, but I think it's important. You know, there's so much strange shit. There's so much stuff that we cannot explain. I don't know, like, how could all of these things be happening in fucking Somerset, Kentucky, right? Like, why? Like, why are all of these people clustering here? Why do we keep finding it? Why do strange things keep happening to us? And it's like, I don't know, man. It has something to do with the magical nature of reality in a weird way, you know? And I don't know.
Another subject you guys are exploring in the second Pennyroyal is going to be the occult history of the U.S. transportation system. Can you explain that to people? What does that mean? That's quite the phrase there.
Man, you know what? Honestly, what started me on that was the second season of True Detective was supposed to be about. They interviewed what's his name, Pizzolatto, the guy that created the show, the writer of the show. They asked him what the second season was going to be about. And he said, it's going to be about the secret occult history of the American transportation system. And then when it came out, it wasn't. Right? You know, and I thought, and this was an early interview. And when I read it, I was like, oh, this sounds amazing. And then it wasn't about that. So then I started researching that because I thought if he was basing the second season on that, he must have found something, right? He must have found a lot of content. And so I started digging into it, and that's when I found all of this stuff about, you know, especially Route 66, you know, the Mother Road, but the way that roads were built in America and the influence of Freemasons, especially because a lot of Freemasons were part of the road commissions that decided where the highway systems went. And what they were really doing were linking cities and lodges together. And when I really dug into it, there was so much strange occult shit that involved the way the roads were laid out. And then it sort of got into this idea of roads as paths to initiation, right? To magical initiations. And another big motif is the fact that here, the second season opens with this crazy story that Hal Rogers, the big senator here in Kentucky senator in Pulaski County, who's done tons of projects, he convinced everyone that this road in Pulaski County, I-66, was actually part of Route 66, but it wasn't, right? And he ended up getting $22 million because everybody thought this connected to this, like, the whole mythology of Route 66, but it was a lie. And they only ended up constructing 5 miles of this road, and it's a road to nowhere. It's just a fucking dead end road, right? And I thought, what a fantastic motif for this whole trajectory of the second season into what the fuck is happening to us? Why are we discovering these things? This concept of the paths of initiation, of roads to nowhere, and this idea of randomness, So, no, man, there's so much weird shit that I found about the history of roads, especially fucking asphalt, right? Downard's father, if people that are familiar with the deep dive into James Shelby Downard, his father was a major asphalt magnate, in the Midwest, laid most of the roads in the heartland of America, and there's this strange alchemical nature to the concept of asphalt. And then you find out that, what's his name? Strange Angel.
Jack Parsons. He solved the liquid fuel rocket problem by, guess what? Adding road asphalt to the mixture, right? So adding road asphalt to this rocket mixture allowed us to create roads into space, and so it's just that more and more of those things, and also that the rockets are the base of a rocket. The most optimal, efficient design is a pentagram, is what really causes the thrust that blasts off. So just so many weird things like that wait till you see how it all connects together. It's crazy. You know what I mean? Like, it is crazy. The more that I dove into that idea of the secret occult history of the American transportation system, the more that I found these weird connections,
And it seems like Somerset is kind of like it's always been it was a railroad hub first, and then, like you were talking about earlier, it's also a part of this highway system that's like a major artery of all kinds of aspects of the underworld also.
Yeah. Highway 27 goes through here. I-75, all these roads that connect Miami to Chicago, you got to go through Somerset, right? And then there's east-west roads, but the railroad is a big, that is the thing, it's this idea of, is that why all of these people ended up here? Is it because Somerset and Kentucky is a crossroads, and then you get into the whole occult, significance of crossroads, and then Pan, Hermes, and these ideas of what lies at the crossroads, and St. Peter, and God, dude, there's so much weird, much weird stuff here.
I think that in the next season of Pennyroyal, that people might hear a familiar voice.
Yes. Yeah. Surfing.
So,
yeah.
Do we want to talk a little bit about what that familiar voice might be talking about?
Well, I don't want to give away too much, but just some of my dives into Downard and his associates, and some things that I suspected that I feel like have been confirmed by other sources now. A lot revolving around Jim Brandon, otherwise known as Bill Grimstad, and Rebirth of Pan. Sources of some of that Pan mythos of there being this pre-Columbian Pan cults and kind of these pre-Columbian European explorer ideas, and what that has to do with these archaeological hoaxes and a bunch of different stuff. But yeah, I think we'll save most of that for Pennyroyal. I'll probably write something around the time that comes out. I really feel like a lot of my suspicions have really been confirmed. And then also I think that Downard was very inspired by Jim Garrison. And I think we touched on that on the previous Patreon. But I think in Garrison you find a kind of proto-synchromysticism.
Propinquity. Yeah.
Time and propinquity, yeah. And then you have some people in Downard's orbit, who were also in Garrison's orbit. So I think Downard might have either spent some time around those folks in New Orleans or been really inspired by Jim Garrison. Who knows how all that went down.
Dude, you blew my mind with the whole, when you guys did the propinquity stuff. I mean, that has to be where Downard got some of this, right? It predates it, but there is a weird connection between, if we can figure out where Downard was between 1950 and 1974, right? That where was he during the JFK assassination? Ann Parton definitely was, this whole Alan Whitwer thing, just Google Alan Whitwer and JFK, and it's this fucking crazy rabbit hole, right? And I was saying to Darian that, can you imagine being Downard? Say you are a paranoid schizophrenic, right? And your ex-wife leaves you, goes to California. You think that she's already connected to the baby farms in Tennessee with Georgia Tan, right?
The ones in Memphis, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which it turns out there were some Partons named. I found this, right? So it is possible that she was one of the Parton family members that was involved in the Georgia Tan stuff. So he already suspects her of being involved in this baby farm of the upper class to steal babies from the lower class, which is crazy. And then she leaves him, they divorce, she leaves St. Petersburg, goes to California, and then he drives across America on the 33rd parallel, right? Stalking his ex-wife, and finds her married to Alan Whitwer. And then when the fucking JFK assassination happens, he realizes that all of these people he suspects they're involved in the assassination are all associated with his ex-wife, right? Who he calls the Great Whore. I mean, for someone who's already fucking crazy and paranoid, it's like Carrie Thornley finding out all that shit that he was connected to. It would drive you fucking nuts, right? You would just go over the edge and think, what the fuck is reality? How can all of this that I thought was already connected actually end up this way? The whole Carrie Thornley connections to the JFK thing, it's ridiculous that Thornley was sending out all those letters pranking everybody. And then it turns out he actually is connected to all these people, and then witnessed the guy talking about murdering JFK and pinning it on a jailbird, right? But the FBI wouldn't believe him because they're like, you sent out all this bullshit telling everybody about the Illuminati. This is just another one of your pranks.
Not to mention that he knew Oswald. They were in the Marines together.
Yeah. He writes Idle Warriors, right? And it's like, there's so many weird connections between Carrie Thornley and JFK that you find when you dig into Downard. There are all of these connections between Downard and the JFK assassination. He writes fucking King Killed 33, So And we're all the ones that are seeing these connections. No one's published this shit, right? And definitely Grimstad and Hoffman are not talking about these connections, you know? And then you got to wonder, why didn't they talk about these connections? If you're going to talk about synchromysticism, the biggest fucking synchronicity is that the great whore was working in the fucking pagan room at the Del Charro Hotel where the conspirators of the JFK assassination were fucking meeting, right? That Alan Whitmer writes about. So why has Hoffman or Downard or Freeland or anyone ever mentioned that? Because if I was championing synchromysticism, right there's the biggest fucking synchronicity in the room, and no one's even fucking mentioning that, you know? Like, it's weird. Why? Why not talk about that?
Well, it might be incriminating.
It was all the great whore and her like mystic butt plug or whatever it was.
All that shit's so strange, man. Surfiel, man, the shit we talked about is so good. But the shit too that we were talking about in terms of fascism and the extreme right in California and all, you know what I mean? Like, it is, I mean, dude, I swear to God, this is the stuff that we're all researching right now. It really is, you know, I'm not trying to like toot our own horns, but this is right now, this is the forefront of what I think of as Fortean research and this type of research, conspiracy, parapolitical, whatever you want to call it, you know, but like the stuff that Adam's finding, you know, the stuff that we're finding, the stuff that we're all collaborating on. It's so fascinating because it's like this obscure blip in history that like, why does it even matter? I always say that to my wife. I'm like, you know, I spend all this time researching Downer. We don't even know, you know, what the real significance is, but it's like, there is something here that is there's a story here that we need to tell because it definitely relates to the consciousness of America and to the way that things have played out and the way that the world is seeing that you can't let these crazy fucks you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't let them have that narrative.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what it was. It's the ultimate hijack that all this stuff comes from the JFK assassination. Who knows what kind of changes JFK would have made to the security establishment and American capitalism. But, you know, it becomes like the countercultural right. They're able to really capitalize on all this stuff. And the more that the left or whatever is left of it or progressive forces or whatever, just, you know, they increasingly are viewed as the establishment, and the countercultural right still is like absolutely on fire and just full of energy, cynicism, and able to manipulate with meme magic. And, you know, it's like,
yeah, no, I mean, it's true. I mean, like, well, I think the biggest thing is acknowledging that it's happening. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's definitely the second season of Penny Royal. I'm trying to highlight the fact that this is a real thing, right? You know, that no matter how crazy you think the shit we're talking about is, that there are people in power that believe those things, and it's absolutely affecting your life, whether you believe it or not, right? And the more that you understand that these things are happening, the more that you're equipped with dealing with the society and the world that you live in today, right? And I don't think people should, you know, put their heads in the sand. God, that's fascinating too, man. I mean, it really is just amazing to look at all this stuff, and people just aren't, you know. One other thing too that I wanted to mention that I found while researching was, you know, Danny Casolaro mentions Pine Gap in his notes, right? And people may be familiar with Pine Gap because of the Netflix. It's an Australian series on Netflix now. And so they show that this, Pine Gap is the U.S. government contracted or created a treaty with Australia, I think in the 70s, to build this basically a data storage, data listening, like all phone calls, all satellite shit, all goes through Pine Gap, right? And it's literally in the geographic center of Australia. And it's just crazy that that's a major CIA, major NSA base. It's a US base, and it's in Australia. So in the, I think it was, I forget what year was it? It was like 1980, maybe it was 1985. I think it was 85. That there was a prime minister who was set to go into power in Australia, and his name was Whitcomb. And he actually was like pro-Australia, fuck America, fuck Pine Gap. We're going to run the CIA out of Australia. And as soon as he said that, the U.S. government basically went into action mode and created a coup in Australia that had him overthrown. And if anybody that wants, look up the whole Whitcomb thing, just type in Whitcomb CIA Australia, and you'll find this crazy story. Well, the CIA agent that brokered the Pine Gap Treaty was a guy named Marchetti, and he ends up being connected to the guy in the documents that we received. Okay, the guy that created all the stuff, that moved all the gold that they gave us. His name is Henry Fisher, and he was a CIA agent tied to Marchetti. And then Marchetti leaves Australia, ends up in America, and guess where he starts publishing fucking articles? In Willis Cardo's Liberty Lobby Spotlight magazine. And he becomes a writer for the Liberty Lobby. So, I mean, like, how fucking strange is that? Like, the guy that helped America found its number 1 spook listening post in the world ends up working with Nazis, like in America, and publishing all of this crazy right-wing shit. And, obviously the Liberty Lobby paid for a lot of Hoffman's publications and Grimstad stuff. And there's an argument to be made that the Liberty Lobby possibly helped Adam Parfrey publish some of his stuff, and I don't know, man, there are these, you've got Danny Casolaro's Octopus, but there's another fucking octopus that exists with these weird tendrils that are not part of the government, but they're this like alt-right.
Yeah, that's a whole other episode.
It's just so strange, man.
Right. I don't know. Did you see when you watched the Strange Realities conference last year? Did you watch Dr. Future's presentation about Pew?
I did not.
Yeah, well, it's still there. I mean, you could go back and watch it, but I mean, he talked about Pew. I mean, the Pew Research Trust. This is who this is named after. He was one of the big money guys behind Carto.
He funded.
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
See, there's see Fisher, who was definitely a CIA agent, who was living in Australia. He comes to America. They actually scammed Thomas Edison's grandniece out of $2 million. This is a whole thing that Steven Snyder told us about. I mean, it's totally true. But Carto, and so Fisher worked for Carto. So a lot of people believe, because of Fisher's connections to the CIA, that Fisher and Carto were CIA agents and that they were playing the alt-right. Because everything they did ended up in this like crazy controversy, right? Ended up in like in the news, ended up just being huge lawsuits, all this fucked up stuff. And it's like, is it because the government was running, basically a counterintelligence operation within the alt-right and Cardo and Fisher were working for them? Or were they just literally these extreme individuals that were fucking, I don't know, doing really, really crazy shit?
It wouldn't surprise me that they may have been using it just for their own ends. Just a very kind of like cynical, selfish approach. It wouldn't surprise me.
And then you throw Hoffman in the mix, Michael Hoffman when he was working for the Liberty Lobby, and then Grimstad too. And then you got these guys working on David Duke's fucking election campaign, that David Duke's, trying to become president.
I'm looking forward to you meeting Dr. Michael Bennett, Dr. Future. Okay. Yeah, he's a fellow Kentuckian. He's from Louisville. So, but his research on the Georgia Guidestones, you need to check out. So one of the things that I am like eternally angry about is the fact that I have a very good friend that figured out the entire mystery of the Georgia Guidestones.
What?
And yeah, he cracked it.
Sure. He cracked it. He cracked the whole thing, and nobody cares. But the thing is that the actual R.C. Christian, he found out who he is. And this guy, it's no one that you would know. He was just a doctor, a physician in Iowa somewhere. But he was a supporter. He gave money to David Duke.
No way.
So the Georgia Guidestones, that is generally touted as the Illuminati wanting to destroy mankind, was actually built by good old right-wing American fascists.
It all comes back to fucking right-wing American fascists. Yeah. I swear. Who is the guy that did this research?
Dr. Future.
Dr. Future.
Yeah.
That's who. Yes. Dr. Future figured this out.
It's on Amazon still, right?
Yeah, it's still there. Look for a film called Dark Clouds Over Elberton, and it's about the building of the Georgia Guidestones and who R.C. Christian really was.
No shit.
Mike figured the whole thing out, and nobody seems to give a shit.
He went like embedded reporter for real.
Yeah. Dark Clouds Over Elberton.
Oh, fuck, man. Now I know what I'm going to watch after. Now I'm going to be up all...
Adam's got it on DVD.
Yeah, I do have it on DVD.
Yeah. I'm so excited to come down to the conference, man. I swear I'm just going to like have a recorder and just like...
Yeah. Yeah. You can actually go back in the Conspirinormal archives. We did a whole episode about it. Mike doesn't talk about it. He doesn't talk about it very much, but he did it. He figured out who it was.
And no one cares because it's not who they...
It's not sexy enough. Yeah, it's not sexy enough.
It's really just some dudes.
And also, it doesn't serve Alex Jones very well for it to be someone that's on his political side of the spectrum.
Jesse Ventura did his, conspiracy theory TV show about the Georgia guys.
Yep.
Yeah, they want to milk that cow for a long time. They don't need that solved.
Yep.
That's crazy, man. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, this was a guy that, he was super into just eugenics. He came from that tradition.
See,
Iowa was in the 1920s was one of the foremost states in the practice of eugenics. And he just came, the Guidestones were built as they were there in this isolated pocket of Elberton, Georgia, which was not originally where it was supposed to have been built. But because of the granite industry there, they built it there. So it was, the late 70s, early 80s, the Cold War was heating up. So there was all this tension. And they thought that, well, if there's a nuclear war, this will be there to re-jumpstart society. So that was the commandment, keep it under 500 million. You don't want to overpopulate. And this whole idea of, but yeah, it's amazing.
Dude, that's so crazy. There is the reason that I contacted Recluse, Stephen Snyder, is that I was researching, all of this right-wing fascism in Kentucky, and he had written that article about the John Birch Society, which, God, man, the John Birch, the Birchers are just all over this shit. It's crazy how intertwined they are. But there is a guy that a really, really super wealthy family in Lexington, Kentucky, where all the, horses and bourbon. And it was the Wycliffe family. And the patriarch of the family that had made all this money was traveling to fucking Germany in the late 20s and early 30s and was a huge supporter of eugenics and was bringing back those principles to Kentucky, to Lexington, and implementing them. And he ended up giving a huge amount of money to Hitler, right? So the family has tried to disavow this and say, no, this is not connected to the family. But then it turns out the family has continued that eugenics support. And there was this South Korean scientist that had the boat in the ocean where he did the cloning experiments. That was paid for by the Wycliffe family. And there's this crazy connection between the first human cloning experiments in international waters and Lexington, Kentucky, the Wycliffe family, and the support of the Nazi eugenics program. And so that's what Stephen was researching. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And that shit is in those fucking documents that someone gave us.
The eugenics programs of the United States influenced Nazi Germany.
See, I didn't know that about the Iowa stuff. Was that where it was? Iowa? That you said?
Yeah, Iowa was one of the states that instituted eugenics type laws back in the 19-teens, 1920s. Yeah.
So you think so you've looked at research that Nazi Germany was really basing its research on?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the eugenics movement predates. It starts off probably around about the 1890s. So there was a lot of influence on Nazi racial theory from the eugenics movement in the United States.
Does it tie into breakaway civilizations at all? I mean, that's right. Time period,
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Well, that's what this all kind of, everything we're talking about kind of coalesces around this idea, even if it's not as extreme as, the really speculative stuff. In a way, there still is this, seems like there's a continuity into like a breakaway civilization of all these different interests that really were able to come above ground in the Third Reich, but before that seemed to be below ground in a lot of places, and after the Third Reich have just kind of been back in the shadows, but still having tremendous influences.
It's exactly it, though. There's so much of what we've been researching that ties into this idea of, and whether you want to get metaphysical with it or magical or Kenneth Grant, but this idea of the subterranean, right? That there really is this underworld motif, the tunnels of Set, right? Which I still think is so funny in a weird, ironic way of, the tunnels underneath Somerset, right? And then now they even use the phrase, the tourism department, it's hashtag see my set, right? And I think that's so funny because they don't see any occult connotation to that. But everything we've been researching, think about how much it ties in to this idea of set and the tunnels of set and the subterranean and that as an element of the subconscious here in this area that people don't even realize they're being affected by those concepts and the motifs, you know. It's true. I mean, it's crazy, man. God, I don't know. I mean, it's what you know. For me, it's like, what does any of this mean? Derry and I were just talking about it. I'm like, I don't even know. We keep finding all this stuff and all of these strange references. The Chuck Hayes stuff is, for me, most recently, the most mind-blowing thing, because I'm like, what the fuck does this mean? You find, you know, finding Guterma was like a gold mine. I was like, holy shit, how could we ever have this story fall in our fucking laps, right? And then we find the Charles Hayes stuff. So now I'm wondering, what exists here that we don't even fucking know about, right? Like, what are we going to find that we're just like, Jesus Christ. I mean, Darian at this point thinks that Somerset is a retirement ground for CIA agents.
It very well could be, and there could be several of those across the country.
That's, you know, because it's like, how could Guterma and Hayes be here? But it's like, what if there are more? What if we find out there are more people here? And it's like,
Yeah.
no, God, dude, I swear.
All right. Well, where can people find you, Nathan?
Yeah.
So definitely check out, you know, Peanut Royal is on all of the platforms. So you know, I think it looks great on Spotify, but Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, everything, you know. Check us out. We've also got peanutroyalpodcast.com, you know, which is our main website. The episodes are on there as well. And then we have the Liminal Lodge. If you guys go on Patreon, look up Penny Royal or Liminal Lodge, you're going to find our Patreon group. It's a community that we've put together that's really digging into this research. You know, absolutely have helped us find new leads. The Chuck Hayes stuff would have never been possible if we hadn't had the Liminal Lodge, you know. And then finding the article with from Grimstad that he sent to Robert Anton Wilson, you know. I mean, those kinds of things, without this group of people helping us research this, we would have never found these things. And so in real time together, this story is playing out. If you'd like to be a part of it, like to help us with the research, definitely consider joining the lodge. But yeah, and then I was planning on releasing the second season in September, but there's been we've found so much new shit in the last like month and a half that it's probably going to end up being like end of the year that I release it. I want to put all of this in there. I know it's such a crazy story, but it's so fascinating, and I think it's so beautiful the way that it is. That it has to make you question what the fuck is happening in your own life, you know, and that's what I hope it does. And so, you know, I want to make sure that everything's in there, and I don't want to rush it. So anyway, it'll probably be a little bit later in the year, but definitely this year. So anyway, yeah. And thank you guys, man. Thank you for having me back on the show. And again, thanks for having me at the Strange Realities.
Yeah. What are you going to present on there?
I'd like, so it's either going to be the Chuck Hayes stuff, you know, in the relationship to Bitcoin, and kind of take everybody through that. The other thing, my original thing that I kind of would like to talk about, passion project wise, is this idea of the Dayton witch, you know, Downard's the Dayton witch that he found in the tomb, and ritual machines, right? Ritual devices, like the Zarya Lolian circles, like these devices that occult groups and researchers through the centuries have built that allow people to decode or de-encrypt reality. And so it's sort of a genealogy of those types of devices. So yeah, it would be one of those two things.
Well, we really look forward to that. And if you want to meet Nathan in person, if everything is going well, then come on down to Nashville and come to Strange Realities.
Yeah, that's October 15th through the 17th in Nashville, Tennessee. The option is come down here, hang out with us. That's $70, or online only for $30, which you won't get the full experience, but you will be able to see the presentations. So come hang out with us then. And then also, guys, we'll go ahead and end up the show. Surfiel can tell you where you can find our Patreon.
You can find our Patreon at patreon.com/Conspirinormal and join one of our many esoteric orders for $5 a month. You get a weekly show. $10, you get to hang out with the Mystic crew, which Nathan has been a part of before. Hopefully we're going to do a presentation in that soon as well. And for $20, you get an exclusive garment and extra special secret experience at the Strange Realities Conference.
Yes, absolutely. All right, guys, that's it. I want to thank Nathan for hanging out with us. And again, Strange Realities Conference, October 15th through the 17th. Come join us and party with Conspirinormal.